The fluorescent lights hummed softly in the pristine laboratory of Seoul Advanced Research Institute. White walls and polished steel surfaces reflected the glow of multiple holographic displays, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere. At the center of it all, Dr. Han Ji-woo's dark eyes sparkled with excitement as she manipulated the three-dimensional data streams floating before her. The room was packed with researchers, their lab coats crisp and their faces showing a mix of exhaustion and hope. They had worked tirelessly for months, and now something extraordinary was happening right before their eyes. "The numbers don't lie," Ji-woo said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She zoomed in on a particular section of the quantum field display, where waves of energy danced in perfect harmony. "Look at how the particles interact. It's beautiful." Dr. Kim Ta-min stepped closer, his round glasses reflecting the blue light of the hologram. He had been working alongside Ji-woo for the past 5 years, and even he was amazed by what they were seeing. "The field responses are completely different from anything in our previous tests," he observed, reaching out to adjust one of the measurement parameters. The team had started their research with a simple question: why did traditional faster-than-light travel require such enormous amounts of energy? Every spacefaring species in the known galaxy used massive engines and power sources to tear holes in spacetime. It was inefficient, dangerous, and limited to only the wealthiest civilizations. Ji-woo pulled up another display, showing their latest simulation results. "Space isn't just an empty canvas we need to force our way through," she explained to the gathered researchers. "It's more like a piece of paper. Everyone else tries to punch through it, but we found a way to simply fold it." The quantum fold drive was unlike anything humanity had created before. Instead of fighting against the natural laws of physics, it worked with them. Ji-woo's team had discovered that space-time itself had natural creases and folds at the quantum level. Their drive simply identified these patterns and enhanced them, creating a pathway through space that required minimal energy. "Ready for the live test?" Ta-min asked, his fingers hovering over the control panel. The unmanned probe they had built sat in a testing chamber several floors below, equipped with their revolutionary drive. Ji-woo nodded, but before she could speak, one of their junior researchers burst into the room. "Dr. Han, we're picking up signals from the outer system. 3 alien observation posts have just changed their alert status." The team had known they were being watched. Earth's solar system had been under observation since humanity first achieved spaceflight. Most alien species viewed humans as promising but primitive, still centuries away from true faster-than-light travel. "Let them watch," Ji-woo said with a small smile. "Begin countdown sequence." The laboratory's atmosphere grew tense as Ta-min initiated the startup procedure. Screens showed the probe's systems coming online one by one, its new drive humming to life, with barely a fraction of the power used by conventional alien FTL engines. "Drive at 20%, 40%, 60%. Ta-min called out the readings, his voice steady but his hands trembling slightly. "Quantum field alignment stable, local space-time mapping complete." Ji-woo held her breath as the final numbers came in. Everything looked perfect, better than their simulations had predicted. "Initiate fold sequence," she commanded. The probe's sensors transmitted every detail as the drive activated. There was no violent tear in space, no massive energy burst. Instead, the fabric of reality seemed to ripple gently, like a curtain in a soft breeze. The probe slipped through, and for a moment, everyone in the lab feared it had failed. Then the tracking data started pouring in. The probe had moved beyond Mars' orbit in seconds, then past Jupiter. It was moving faster than light, but using less power than a small city. The impossible had become possible. Around the solar system, alien observation posts scrambled to make sense of what their sensors were telling them. They detected no standard FTL signatures, no massive energy discharge, nothing that fit their understanding of faster-than-light travel. Yet there it was, a human vessel moving through space in a way that defied everything they thought they knew about physics. In the lab, cheers and tears of joy broke out as the probe continued its perfect flight. Jiwoo felt Tai Min's hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently in congratulation. They had done it. Humanity had not only achieved faster than light travel, but they had discovered a completely new way to move through space. "Send the signal," Jiwoo said, her voice thick with emotion. "Bring it home." The probe responded instantly, folding space once more to return to its starting position. The entire test had covered billions of kilometers, and it had used less energy than a traditional chemical rocket launch. As celebration erupted around her, Jiwoo stared at the final data readings. She knew that everything was about to change. Humanity had just announced their presence on the galactic stage in a way that no one could ignore. The age of expensive, energy-hungry faster-than-light travel was over. A new era was about to begin, and it would start right here, in this lab in Seoul. The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council's Grand Hall sparkled with the light of 3 suns. Representative Park Hae-ri stood at the center of the circular chamber, her traditional Korean hanbok a splash of elegant blue amid the varied forms of alien delegates. She kept her expression calm, though her heart raced as voices rose around her in a storm of protests and exclamations. The council chamber was designed to accommodate over 200 species, with environmental bubbles for those who breathe different atmospheres and gravity adjusters for those from heavier or lighter worlds. Today, every seat was filled as news of humanity's achievements spread through the galaxy. "This must be some kind of mistake," rumbled the delegate from the mining worlds, their crystalline form glittering as they shifted in agitation. "Humans are barely past their first space colonies. They cannot have solved the energy problem." Hae-ri smoothed her sleeves, a gesture that helped her maintain her composure. "The data has been verified by your own observation posts," she said, her voice clear and steady. "Would you like to see it again?" The chief science officer, a tall being with iridescent scales, stepped forward. Their multiple eyes blinked in different patterns, showing their distress. "Impossible. The energy readings must be wrong. No civilization at their level could achieve such advancement. It breaks every known law of physics." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Hae-ri noticed how the older species, those who had held power for thousands of years, seemed the most upset. The younger races watched with obvious interest, some even leaning forward in their seats. "If I may," Hae-ri said, gesturing to the central holographic projector. The device hummed to life, creating a perfect 3-dimensional image above the chamber floor. "This is the complete recording from our test flight." The council members fell silent as they watched the human probe prepare for its jump. Many of them had expected to see the usual signs of FTL travel: the massive energy buildup, the violent tear in space, the radiation discharge. Instead, they saw something that seemed to defy reality itself. The probe simply moved. There was no drama, no light show, no devastating release of power. Space itself seemed to fold around the vessel like silk in a gentle breeze, and then it was gone. The energy readings stayed remarkably low throughout the entire process. "That's not possible," whispered one of the senior council members, their translator struggling to convey their shock. "We've spent millennia developing our FTL systems. The energy requirements are absolute. The mathematical models are proven." Hae-ri allowed a small smile to cross her face. Perhaps the models were incomplete. "Our scientists took a different approach. Instead of forcing space to bend, we learned to work with its natural tendencies." The chamber erupted again. Some delegates demanded immediate access to the technology. Others called for restrictions, claiming safety concerns. A few of the more militant species started arguing about the military implications. "Order." The council leader's voice boomed through the chamber, enhanced by their ceremonial staff. "Representative Park, your species has made an extraordinary claim. We require proof beyond recordings." "Of course," Hae-ri said with a slight bow. "Earth is prepared to demonstrate the technology directly. We can arrange for a human vessel to make the journey to the council station. Under your observation, naturally." The leader's four arms moved in a pattern that indicated deep thought. The journey takes 3 weeks with our fastest ships. When could your vessel arrive? Tomorrow, Hyri replied simply. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the environmental systems seemed to pause for a moment. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just developed a new form of FTL travel. They had created something that made existing systems look primitive in comparison. Tomorrow, the mining world delegate's crystalline form actually cracked slightly in shock. That's impossible. Hyri finished for them. You may wish to find a different word. The impossible seems to be happening quite frequently lately. She could see the fear in some of their reactions, the worry about what this meant for the power structure they had maintained for so long. But she also saw hope, especially among the representatives of less developed worlds. Humanity's discovery could change everything for them. The demonstration will proceed, the council leader declared, their staff striking the floor with finality. Tomorrow, we will see if humanity has truly achieved what they claim. Until then, this session is adjourned. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, discussing the news in dozens of languages and communication methods, Hyri sent a simple message back to Earth. The council was ready. Now it was time to show them that humanity wasn't just making claims. They were about to change the galaxy forever. She looked up at the 3 suns shining through the crystal dome, thinking about how much closer everything was about to become. The stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter, as if they too were ready for a new age of exploration. The HSS Breakthrough emerged from its final fold maneuver with perfect precision, its sleek hull gleaming under the light of unfamiliar stars. On the bridge, Captain Lee Min-ho watched as the massive council station grew larger in their view screen, its spiral arms stretching out like a flower blooming in space. Station control, this is Captain Lee of the HSS Breakthrough, requesting docking clearance, he announced, his voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. The crew around him worked their stations with focused determination, though he noticed more than a few quick glances at the magnificent station ahead. There was a noticeable pause before the response came. S Breakthrough. Our systems show you departed Earth 6 hours ago. That's not possible. Min-ho shared a knowing look with his navigation officer. I assure you, it's quite possible. We have our docking coordinates and are ready to proceed. The council station was a marvel of engineering, home to representatives from hundreds of species. Its docking bays usually handled dozens of ships daily, all of them using conventional FTL drives that left obvious energy signatures. The Breakthrough, however, had appeared with barely a ripple in space-time. Dr. Han Ji-woo stood beside the captain, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched their approach. The ship was her design as much as anyone's, incorporating the quantum fold drive she had helped develop. They're scanning us, she noted, watching the sensor readings. Every scanner they have is pointed in our direction. The docking procedure went smoothly, despite the obvious nervousness of the station's control team. As the airlock sealed and pressures equalized, Ji-woo prepared herself for what would likely be the most important presentation of her life. The council's reception chamber was packed with representatives and scientists from across the galaxy. Some floated in environmental bubbles, others stood on gravity platforms, but all attention was focused on the human delegation as they entered. Ji-woo took her place at the central podium, activating the holographic display system. The familiar quantum field patterns sprang to life around her, drawing gasps from several of the assembled scientists. Distinguished members of the council, she began, her voice clear and confident. What you're seeing is not just a new method of faster-than-light travel. It's a fundamental shift in how we understand space-time itself. The display shifted, showing the traditional method of FTL travel, massive energy expenditure tearing holes in space. For centuries, species have forced their way through space, fighting against its natural laws. But space-time isn't a barrier to be broken. She gestured, and the display changed to show the quantum-level movements they had discovered. At its smallest scale, space-time is constantly moving. folding, and unfolding. Billions of times every second, reality itself creates natural pathways. We didn't invent a new way to travel. We simply learned to see these pathways and use them. The technical committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, a being composed primarily of light and energy, spoke up. What you suggest violates every principle of physics we've established over thousands of years. Ji-woo smiled gently. No, it doesn't violate them. It completes them. Your equations weren't wrong. They were just missing a crucial variable. Space-time doesn't resist movement. It welcomes it, if you know how to ask properly. She demonstrated with another simulation, showing how their drive worked with space's natural tendencies rather than against them. The energy readings were so low that several committee members demanded the sensors be recalibrated. Think of it like swimming, Ji-woo explained. You can fight against the water, pushing it aside with brute force, or you can learn to move with it, using its own flow to carry you along. We've been fighting against space when we should have been dancing with it. The chamber erupted in questions, each species trying to understand how their civilizations had missed something so fundamental. Ji-woo answered them patiently, explaining the principles in terms each could understand. As the session continued, she noticed a change in the atmosphere. The initial skepticism was giving way to excitement, especially among the younger scientists. They could see the possibilities this opened up, not just for travel, but for their understanding of the universe itself. Captain Minho, standing at the back of the chamber, watched with pride as Ji-woo handled every question with grace and clarity. Their journey here had taken just 6 hours, but it had opened the door to a future where no part of the galaxy would be too far to reach. The technical committee's leader finally raised their hand for silence. Dr. Han, what you've shown us today will require significant review and testing. But I believe I speak for many when I say that humanity has given us much to think about. Ji-woo nodded respectfully, knowing that this was just the beginning. They had brought more than just a new technology to the council. They had brought a new way of seeing the universe itself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest breakthrough of all. The private meeting chamber deep within the council station's restricted sector buzzed with tension. Behind sealed doors and active security fields, representatives of the 12 oldest spacefaring civilizations gathered in what they called an emergency session. Their environmental bubbles and gravity platforms clustered close together, creating an intimate circle of power and privilege. Elder Ricks of the Silver Worlds leaned forward, their metallic skin reflecting the soft lighting. These humans must be contained. They have no understanding of the dangers they're playing with, no appreciation for the proper order of technological development. Around the circle, heads and various sensory organs nodded in agreement. These species had ruled space for thousands of years, carefully controlling the spread of advanced technology. Now humans had bypassed centuries of gradual progress. Their drive system has not been properly tested, declared another elder, their translator struggling to convey their agitation. No long-term studies, no safety protocols. They could tear the fabric of space itself. But everyone in the room knew the real fear wasn't about safety. Humanity's quantum fold drive threatened something far more precious, their control over faster-than-light travel. The massive infrastructure needed for traditional FTL systems had kept younger species dependent on the older ones for centuries. Meanwhile, in a brightly lit laboratory several levels below, Dr. Kim Ta-min spread out holographic diagrams for a very different audience. Representatives from 15 developing species crowded around him, their eyes and various sensory organs fixed on the display with obvious excitement. The principles are actually quite simple, Ta-min explained, adjusting his glasses. Your current ships can be modified to use our drive system. The power requirements are minimal compared to traditional methods. A young scientist from a world that had barely achieved spaceflight raised their hand. But the older species say it's dangerous, that we need centuries of preparation before attempting FTL travel. Ta-min smiled gently. Tell me, does a child need to learn to crawl for 10 years before they can walk? Sometimes, a better way of doing things makes the traditional path unnecessary. He brought up new diagrams showing the modification process. These species might not have the massive shipyards and power plants of the older civilizations, but they had something just as valuable: fresh perspectives and eager minds. Back in the private chamber, the coalition of elder species was drafting legislation. "We must establish strict testing requirements," one insisted. "Safety reviews that could take decades to complete. It's for their own protection, of course." "Of course," others echoed, but their tones carried different meanings. They all understood that bureaucracy could be a weapon as effective as any warship. What they didn't know was that their carefully controlled meeting wasn't as private as they thought. Recording devices, placed by younger species tired of being held back, captured every word of their true concerns. In the lab, Ta-Nin was showing another group how the quantum fold drive interfaced with standard ship systems. A representative from a desert world raised an important point. "The elder species control all major trade routes. They could restrict resources, prevent us from building these drives." "They could try," Ta-Min acknowledged. "But the materials needed for our drive are common. The power systems are simple. What matters most is understanding the principles, and those can't be restricted." He brought up a new display showing the quantum field patterns. "Look at how space naturally folds. It's been doing this since the beginning of time. We didn't invent anything new. We just finally noticed what was always there." The excitement in the room was palpable. Species that had been told they were centuries away from true space travel were seeing a new future open before them. Their ships might be smaller and less impressive than the massive vessels of the elder species, but soon they would fly just as far. Word spread quickly through the station's lower levels. While the coalition of elders plotted restrictions and regulations, the younger species were already sharing ideas and forming their own alliances. They saw in humanity's achievement something the older civilizations had forgotten: the joy of discovery, the thrill of breaking free from artificial limitations. Ta-Min worked late into the night, answering questions and helping different species adapt the drive concepts to their own technologies. He knew the elder species would try to stop this, but he also knew it was too late. Knowledge, once shared, couldn't be contained. As he walked back to his quarters, passing through the station's grand observation deck, he paused to look at the stars. They seemed closer now, more accessible. The universe was about to change, not through the careful control of ancient civilizations, but through the shared dreams of those who had been told to wait their turn. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more attempts to slow the spread of this technology. But tonight, in labs and workshops across the station, a new future was already taking shape. The stars were waiting, and now everyone could reach them. The collaborative laboratory on Council Station's science deck had changed dramatically over the past month. What started as a simple human research space now hosted scientists from 20 different species, their various environmental systems creating a symphony of soft hums and gentle clicks. Dr. Han Jiwoo stood at the central workstation, surrounded by floating displays showing ship schematics from across the galaxy. Beside her, a scientist from the water worlds adjusted their aquatic breathing apparatus while studying the data through compound eyes. "Look at this," Jiwoo pointed to a particular energy pattern. "Every ship, regardless of design, creates these same quantum ripples. It's like they're already trying to use the natural folds in space, but the old drives are too crude to detect them." The team had made an extraordinary discovery. The principles behind the quantum fold drive weren't just compatible with existing ships, they could revolutionize them. A young engineer from a low-gravity world floated nearby, their tail twitching with excitement as they pulled up the test results. "We modified a standard cargo ship yesterday," they said, their translator conveying their enthusiasm. Power consumption dropped to almost nothing compared to the old system. The captain couldn't believe the readings. Jiwoo nodded, remembering the cargo captain's stunned expression. The ship had been scheduled for decommissioning, its elderly drive system too expensive to maintain. Now it could fly faster and farther than the newest vessels of the elder species. The lab had become more than just a research center. It was a symbol of cooperation. Species that had never worked together were sharing ideas, combining their unique perspectives to improve the technology even further. A scientist with crystalline skin worked alongside one made mostly of gas, their differences forgotten in the excitement of discovery. The fold patterns show up everywhere, Ji Wu explained to a group of new arrivals. She brought up a three-dimensional map of local space. See these natural lines. They're like currents in an ocean, flowing through space itself. Old drives punch through them, but we can slip right into the flow. One of the senior researchers, their ancient species known for careful deliberation, raised an appendage. But the energy savings, they violate everything we know about space travel. The calculations say it's impossible. Ji Wu smiled, having heard this concern many times before. She pulled up the latest test data. The old calculations assumed we needed to fight against space to move through it. But look what happens when we work with it instead. The displays showed a small probe following the natural quantum folds. Its energy signature was barely detectable, yet it moved faster than ships 100 times its size. The implications were revolutionary. Any species with basic space technology could now reach the stars. Around the lab, teams worked on adapting the principles to different technologies. Some focused on improving existing drives, while others designed completely new systems based on human insights. The excitement was infectious, spreading through the station as more species joined the effort. A young scientist from a world that had barely achieved spaceflight approached Ji Wu, their bioluminescent patches glowing with nervous energy. My people, we could never afford the old drive systems. But this, we could build this. Ji Wu placed a gentle hand on their shoulder, careful of their delicate exoskeleton. That's exactly why we're sharing this knowledge. Space shouldn't belong to only those who can afford massive engines. The lab's communication system chimed with incoming messages from across the galaxy. Ships testing the modified drives reported success after success. Species that had been bound to their home systems were suddenly reaching out to the stars. As the day cycle wound down, Ji Wu took a moment to look around the lab. Holographic displays shimmered with data, environmental bubbles hummed, and beings from across the galaxy worked together in harmony. This was what space travel should be about. Not power or control, but discovery and cooperation. A soft alert indicated another successful test, this time from a deep space mining vessel. The captain's message was simple. It works. It really works. Thank you. Ji Wu saved the message along with hundreds of others. Each one represented a dream fulfilled, a barrier broken, a future opened. The universe was vast, but with this technology, it was becoming a little smaller, a little more accessible to everyone. As she prepared to end her shift, a new group of scientists arrived, eager to learn. The work would continue through the night, as it had for weeks now. The paradigm wasn't just shifting, it had already shifted. There was no going back to the old ways, not when the new path forward was so clear. The stars beckoned, and now everyone could answer their call. The Grand Council chamber felt heavy with anticipation as hundreds of delegates settled into their positions. Representative Park Hyrie sat calmly in the human section, watching as the coalition of elder species prepared to present their proposal. The artificial sunlight streaming through the crystal dome seemed dimmer today, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The council leaders struck their ceremonial staff against the floor, bringing the chamber to order. We will now hear the coalition's proposal regarding safety protocols for faster-than-light travel systems. A tall, elegant being from one of the oldest spacefaring races glided to the center platform. Their silvery skin rippled as they activated the chamber's holographic systems. Honored members, we present these regulations out of deep concern for the safety of all space-traveling species. Hyrie noticed how carefully they avoided mentioning Earth or humans directly. The proposed regulations appeared on floating screens throughout the chamber. detailed in multiple languages and communication formats. All new drive systems must undergo 500 years of controlled testing. The speaker continued. Power systems must be certified by existing facilities. All designs must be approved by the Central Technology Board. The restrictions went on and on. Each one seemed reasonable on the surface, but Hy-Ri could see the true purpose. Every requirement, every certification, every approval process was designed to maintain the elder species' control over space travel. Murmurs spread through the chamber as delegates realized the implications. The younger species representatives shifted uneasily in their seats. Some tried to raise objections, but the coalition had prepared well, drowning out protests with procedural rules. Hy-Ri watched it all, waiting. She had learned from her years in diplomacy that timing was everything. The coalition speaker continued listing requirements, each one more restrictive than the last. Furthermore, all FTL technology must be compatible with existing power distribution networks, they declared, effectively requiring everyone to remain dependent on the elder species infrastructure. Finally, Hy-Ri saw her moment. She stood, her traditional hanbok making a soft rustle that somehow cut through the chamber's noise. I request permission to address the council. The council leader nodded, and Hy-Ri moved to the central platform. She carried no data devices, no presentations, just the quiet confidence of someone holding a winning hand. Distinguished members, she began, her voice clear and steady. I have listened carefully to these proposed regulations. They speak of safety, of careful progress, of protecting our shared space. These are noble goals. She paused, letting her words sink in. The chamber was completely silent now, every being focused on her next words. However, I must inform the Council that humanity has already shared our research with 15 developing species. The knowledge exists. It cannot be contained. We offer you partnership, not competition. The chamber exploded with voices. The coalition members tried to shut her down, but Hy-Ri continued, her voice cutting through the chaos. Even now, ships across the galaxy are being modified with our drive systems. They're safer than traditional drives. They use less power. They're cheaper to build and maintain. This isn't just about travel. It's about freedom. She gestured to the younger species representatives. Ask them how this technology has changed their worlds. Ask them if they want to go back to depending on others for access to space. One by one, delegates from the developing species stood up. Each had a story. Of ships renewed, of trades renewed, of hope renewed. The coalition members watched helplessly as their control slipped away. These regulations, Hy-Ri continued, would turn back progress. They would restrict what cannot be restricted. The knowledge is out there. The changes are happening. The question isn't whether to allow it. The question is whether you will join us in shaping this new future. She turned to face the elder species directly. Your experience is valuable. Your wisdom is needed, but progress cannot be stopped. Work with us. Help us ensure this technology spreads safely and responsibly. Be partners in this new age, not obstacles to it. The council chamber buzzed with discussion. The coalition members huddled together, their carefully planned strategy crumbling. Younger species began calling for an immediate vote to reject the proposed regulations. The council leader raised their staff for order. Representative Park speaks truth. This technology cannot be contained. Perhaps we should consider a different approach. Hy-Ri bowed slightly and returned to her seat. She had said what needed to be said. Now it was time to let the council face reality. Adapt or become obsolete. The future of space travel had already changed. The only question was who would help guide it forward. As the debate continued around her, Hy-Ri sent a brief message to Earth. The coalition's attempt to restrict the technology had failed. A new era of space travel was truly beginning. And this time, everyone would have a chance to reach for the stars. The council station's massive docking bays hummed with activity as ships of all shapes and sizes moved gracefully through space. A sleek vessel with the newest quantum fold drive slipped smoothly into dock beside an ancient freighter sporting recently installed hybrid systems. Their differences in age and design meant nothing now. Both could travel the stars with equal ease. Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the HSS Breakthrough, watching a training exercise through the main viewport. Ships from 15 different species practiced formation flying, their modified drives allowing them to move in perfect harmony. A year ago, such coordination would have been impossible with the violent, energy-hungry drives of the past. "Beautiful, isn't it?" his first officer remarked, watching a crystalline ship execute a perfect fold maneuver. Hard to believe there was ever any opposition to this technology. Minho nodded, remembering the early days of tension and resistance. Now the same species that had fought against the new drive systems were proudly showing off their own improvements to the design. Progress had a way of changing minds. Down in the station's main research center, Dr. Han Jiwoo worked with a team of scientists from across the galaxy. The laboratory had expanded dramatically, now occupying an entire section of the station. Every day brought new discoveries as different species contributed their unique perspectives to understanding spacetime. "Look at this pattern," a young engineer from a gas giant world pointed out, their environmental suit gleaming under the lab lights. "We found it by combining your quantum fold principles with our atmosphere manipulation technology." Jiwoo studied the data with interest. What had started as a simple drive system had grown into something far more profound, a new way of understanding the universe itself. Teams of scientists were discovering applications far beyond simple space travel. The Interstellar Scientific Coalition, headquartered in Seoul, had become the galaxy's leading research institution. Species that once barely acknowledged each other now worked side by side, sharing knowledge and building on each other's discoveries. "We're receiving another application for membership," Jiwoo's assistant announced. "A species from the Outer Rim. They just achieved spaceflight last month using a modified fold drive." Jiwoo smiled, remembering how different things had been just a year ago. The old power structure of the galaxy had been based on who could afford the biggest ships and most powerful drives. Now, even the smallest worlds could reach for the stars. In the station's observation dome, representatives from various worlds gathered for the annual science conference. The theme this year was Unity Through Understanding, a recognition of how shared knowledge had brought the galaxy's species closer together. Dr. Kim Ta-min, now head of the Coalition's Education Division, prepared to address the gathered delegates. The faces looking back at him represented the full diversity of galactic life, from energy beings to silicon-based life forms, all united by their desire to learn and explore. "The quantum fold principles taught us more than just how to travel faster," he began. "They showed us that the universe itself encourages cooperation. When we work with nature instead of against it, when we share knowledge instead of hoarding it, we all move forward together." Outside the station, ships continued their elegant dance through space. The violent tears and energy bursts of old-style FTL drives were becoming rare sights. Instead, vessels slipped smoothly between the stars, following the natural flows of spacetime that had always been there, waiting to be discovered. Back on the Breakthrough's bridge, Captain Minho received a request for assistance from a newly spacefaring species. Their first interstellar ship needed guidance on using their fold drive. A year ago, such a request would have gone to one of the elder species, probably to be denied or delayed. Now it was just another opportunity to share knowledge. "Plot an intercept course," he ordered. "Let's show them how it's done."